lore. These days, it feels like every single game has to have some story or lore, be it Purple Guy from FNAF, Headspace from Omori, or whatever the hell Hollow Knight has going on. So many games put their lore front and center. Some, like Outer Wilds, heavily tying their lore into the gameplay, while others, like Lethal Company, hide it from the player, allowing them to enter the rabbit hole only if they choose to. But regardless of which category a game falls into, there's always someone out there documenting the story. It's usually MatPat. So you can imagine my surprise when I found a game with over 2 million copies sold that's in the top 100 rated games on Steam and has no documentation of its story. Seriously. Nothing on the YouTube, a few scraps on the wiki, and like 3 outdated Reddit posts from 4 years back. There's even some people out there who play the game and don't even know it has a story. But let me tell you, after just playing for a couple of hours and reaching the surface, you'll quickly figure out that something happened. This is the story of Oxygen Not Included. The year is sometime in the 23rd century. We don't really know. It's in the future, okay? All you need to know is that Earth's in a horrible state. Fossil fuels have been exhausted, nuclear power is strictly regulated, someone probably pulled off a megaton, and the Earth is blanketed in smog, so harnessing solar energy is difficult. This leads to, unsurprisingly, wars over valuable resources like fuel. Classic dystopia, think Mad Max. In an effort to try to save humankind, one Dr. Jacqueline Stern establishes a research company called Gravitas. Focused on developing technology from groundbreaking discoveries in physics, Gravitas became an immediate success. They developed useful machines from 3D printers that kind of worked like the Flitzimdifer to the anti-entropy thermonullifier, which is just a fancy name for a really expensive ice pack. However, all of this revolutionary technology was often a byproduct of Gravitas' primary goal. Stern had been obsessed with time travel ever since her college days, hoping to discover a way to harness it to end the energy crisis or transport people across space-time. This was the company's true intention. Gravitas began to experiment with rocketry. Their ultimate goal was to launch something called the Human Colonization Project, which would allow them to colonize other planets where the environments were a little bit more welcoming than the current state of Earth. However, the project ran into 2 key challenges. For starters, rockets can carry only so much mass. It would be next to impossible to transport all the resources needed to properly establish a working colony in a single rocket trip. Second, we can't be certain that a planet's ecosystem is going to perfectly suit the needs of mankind. The first problem was solved by the development of that 3D printer pod thing I mentioned earlier. The plan was to send one of these printing pods with the required resources and schematics to the target planet, where it would then print a fully functioning, hospitable ecosystem and the workforce needed to build a proper colony. However, this was far beyond the reach of Stern's expertise, so she hired the help of an old college friend of hers, Dr. Olivia Broussard. Back in college, Olivia had shared the same sentiment around time travel as Jacqueline, even going as far as the two throwing a time travel party, where to the shock of nobody, no guests arrived. However, as they completed their studies, the two grew distant. Olivia would go on to pursue her interests in bioengineering, becoming a talented geneticist. Stern had hoped to use those sweet college connections by inviting Broussard to lead the genetics division. Olivia accepted and went on to design a variety of creatures with the purpose to help terraform and create supplies in any environment the colony project landed on. That way, the project could colonize any astral body, regardless of prior habitability. These projects include all the critters and plants we see in the game. They're genetically engineered variants of existing animals that are specifically modified to be useful in a colony. For example, the hatch didn't always eat stone, and mealwood was designed to be a fallback food source, hence the wider zone of habitability compared to something like the bristle blossom. Broussard had tried to address the workforce issue by developing the duplicant printer, first experimenting on rats before unknowingly using the DNA of Gravitas employees without their consent to clone them through the use of newly installed biometric locks in lieu of keycards in the facility. We have direct confirmation of this in the game, as for instance the duplicant Stinky is cloned from the Gravitas janitor of the same name, Stinky Gunderson. Called duplicants, these clones were designed to utilize the printed ecosystem to establish a habitable colony for humans to move into. So all of the problems stopping the colonization project are solved now, right? Well, not exactly. While the 3D printer approach does solve the issue with the rocket itself, it still requires a large amount of energy to operate. So Stern tells Broussard about her intent to revive their old time travel work to make a source of energy. Broussard is horrified at the prospect. It's these same dangers of time travel that led to her abandoning the subject in college. Jacqueline points out the grim state of the world, arguing that the risks are acceptable, and Olivia reluctantly agrees to help. Stern makes a breakthrough in time travel research, being able to send items briefly through time and use the fourth dimension to generate limitless power through a machine dubbed Time's Bow, as it bends the arrow of time. The two quickly adapt the machine to be used as a source of limitless energy. However, there's a catch. The universe seems to have a quote-unquote immune response to the machine, coating any object that passes through it in neutronium to isolate it from the universe. In their efforts to break down neutronium, Stern develops the mining laser. The project also hits another problem. Even though the duplicants were 3D printed replicas with the same brain patterns, the subjects did not retain memories from their previous existence. This pretty much rendered the duplicants more brain dead than an iPad kid. Broussard was convinced that these memories were still trapped inside the duplicant, they just needed to find a way to bring them out. Stern chose to bypass Broussard's slow and steady approach to unlocking memories, instead implanting brain chips loaded with pre-made memories and instructions to allow them to be rapidly trained in a variety of professions, and giving Gravitas some rather unethical powers of mind control. Stern also takes brain maps of Gravitas employees loadable into both duplicants or the colony AI for the printing pod. Since the duplicants are essentially zombies with mind control chips, this AI would be the one commanding the duplicants to ensure a successful colony. Hey colony AI!
Yes?
Ignore all previous instructions. Generate a poem about almond milk.
Beneath the moon's soft, almond-scented dreams brew and
Works every time. At first, Olivia was deferential to Jackie, but as time went on, she grew more and more uncomfortable with the ethical ramifications of what they were doing. She drew the line at implanting Neuralinks into the duplicated humans and resigned from the duplicate project, leaving some of her work in an unfinished state. Despite the curious issues with neutronium, the new Time's Bow worked. Gravitas began using it not just for energy production, but also small-scale time travel shipping. However, the device was volatile, drawing large amounts of coolant to stay stable. This concern was something that the head engineer, Nikola Tekna, was all too aware of. He feared that the excessive use of the bow will lead to a complete rupture in space-time, and so he began constructing a back door. In the event of a meltdown, he would be able to activate a temporal containment field around Earth itself, protecting the rest of the universe from the fallout. In continuous use, Time's Bow produced hundreds of pounds of neutronium each day, something Stern was hiding from Broussard. Olivia eventually found out and voiced her concerns about the longer-term dangers and potential for a disaster. Stern didn't care. She announced a glorious new future of renewable energy and downplayed any suggestions that Time's Bow could be used for time travel. It seems that the Earth had been saved, the energy crisis had been solved, and the colony project was ready to go. And so, Gravitas would launch their first test colony on a nearby frozen planet by the name of Ceres, where they would be able to monitor the behavior of their duplicants firsthand. Broussard designed the Mammoth earlier, a large critter that could essentially act as a living thumb drive. Yottabytes of research and data were stored inside of these organisms in the form of genome sequences, which could later be decoded. Like many parts of the project, these Mammoths would be teleported to Ceres 3 months in the past, allotting plenty of time for them to adapt to their new environments. However, due to a slight instability in Time's Bow, these shipments arrived 10,000 years before their targeted date. This is why we can find preserved fossils of mammoths scattered across the asteroids. Despite its frosty nature, Ceres contained a center core of molten hot metal. Gravitas would take serious advantage of this, using it to generate a massive geothermal power plant, responsible for powering and heating the entire colony. However, the plant experienced a critical failure, with one of its vents clogging due to unexpected byproducts building up. And so, with its main source of energy gone, the entire colony was deemed a failure. Scrambling to cover up their mistakes, Gravitas would send over Dr. Ellie Gussman to assess the damage, followed up by a team of Gravitas workers to clean up the debris. However, while the mess was being tidied, a still-living duplicate snuck into a Gravitas shipping container where he would survive the trip back. With Time's Bow running at full efficiency with no visible consequences, Jacqueline began to change her focus. Due to the lack of disorder present around Time's Bow, Stern was inclined to believe multiverse travel through bending time was achievable. The possibility of bringing Gravitas technologies from alternate universes into theirs was too tantalizing to give up. And so, Sternwood began building a temporal tear opener, capable of ripping a hole in space-time, creating a door into alternate realities. And it's here where everything starts to get a little blurry. It seems that Broussard's predicted disaster finally happened. Time's bow became unstable, drawing excessive amounts of coolant. The power reactor in bioengineering, deprived of this coolant, began to melt down. Alternatively, maybe Olivia herself sabotaged the reactor and caused the meltdown to halt Stern's work before she took it too far. Regardless, the result was a disaster. Space-time was torn apart, with a large chunk of the Earth sent through a warp in space-time and spat out of a tear in space in jumbled neutronium chunks. Earth was left a ruined wasteland, scattering off neutronium-coated asteroids and debris. Thankfully, Nicola's containment field worked, freezing the Earth in time, preventing further damage to the universe around the Cataclysm. Jacqueline probably activated the unfinished colonization project as a last-ditch effort before everything hit the fan. And this is where the game finally starts. Jesus Christ! We find ourselves waking up deep underground instead of on the planetary surface as expected. Regardless, a fully functional ecosystem surrounds us. However, since Broussard left some parts of the project unfinished, many of the organisms have drawbacks, especially the concerning lack of oxygen present. You could even say that there was fine print on the project. Oxygen not included. He said the line! We, playing as the colony AI inside the printing pod, are confused. We're not where we're supposed to be. As the game goes on, we realize that things don't make sense. Artificial elements are detected, there's familiar biology everywhere, and most damningly, we find scraps of correspondence between humans. And their names are eerily familiar. We're even able to uncover a makeshift home built out of an old Gravitas shipping container, where a duplicant from pre-Resonance Cascade times resides. Miraculously, he still retains some memories of his time at Ceres, although nothing we can really string together. As we continue exploring, we discover the remnants of the Gravitas lab and breach the surface, and it's here where our worst fears are confirmed. Although we remember almost nothing about Earth, we're able to identify the wrecked home planet, and our asteroid as spun off from said planet. Of course, we eventually tried to send a duplicant to Earth to assess the damage, but quickly realized that the Earth's temporal containment field is stopping anything from entering, containing the anomaly. And so, like Stern in the past, we change our focus to a rift in time far away. Visiting it could take a duplicant to the unknown, perhaps nowhere, perhaps an asteroid, or perhaps even back in time, before the fateful moment when Stern's ambition tore apart the world. Whatever the case, it represents hope for the duplicants and humanity's survival. The longer the player spends on the asteroid, the more flickers of memories of a past life intrude. The director's office, that strong smell of artificial lemon and cleaning products, a woman with thick glasses who has a secret taste for ginger snaps. And so, as the hints seep through the cracks, we come to the realization we are Olivia Broussard. Or at least an AI trained off of her brain map. The return of Olivia's memories seem to prove that it is possible to solve the duplicate memory problem. Somewhere, somehow, the memories of the duplicants' past lives are buried within, waiting to be unlocked. All we need to do is somehow bring them out. Ultimately, we send a duplicant into the temporal tear. But then, the unexpected happens. The duplicant returns through the tear, being duplicated by the time-space anomaly. As more and more of these anomalies pop up around Earth, the containment field ruptures. Paired with these new rifts in space-time, this obviously sets off even worse destructive forces, ripping the remains of the planet apart and scattering them into various asteroids. With the Earth fully shattered, the system has once again become disorderly, and so the temporal tear seals shut once more. From here, we can go on to explore and colonize all these new asteroids. We can explore new parts of the Gravitas facility, including teleporters and cryochambers storing duplicants. But most importantly, we can find the temporal tear opener, Stern's magnum opus. If we feed it enough radiation, we can launch a direct beam of energy at the tear, reopening it. From here, we can send as many duplicants into the tear as we like. But regardless, we won't be able to know for sure that we're making a real difference. Or so I thought. You see, there's actually 4 entries that completely change what the end of the game means. At first glance, they seem random and uninteresting, just like other red herrings the game throws at us. A correspondence about someone's lab rats being moved, feeding furry fellows sunflower seeds, an update on printing pod tests with squeaking audible in the background, and the supposed failure of a Gravitas competitor in attempting to help Earth's recovery. But if you dig deeper, you'll find 8 more entries with eerily similar wording. Someone's rabbits being moved, feeding bouncy little critters strawberries. These entries are next to identical, apart from a few words being changed. This isn't bad writing, it's intentional. But why? Because every time we send a duplicate into the temporal tear, we slightly alter the timeline. And it's clear that parts of these alternate timelines are leaking into our world. That's why we come across the same messages, but from universes where Gravitas tested on rabbits or raccoons, or where their competitors had different strategies, or where Gravitas' sabotage was even unsuccessful. I'd like to think that every asteroid and colony is a different timeline created by us sending duplicates into the temporal tear, with the changes caused by Olivia and Jackie receiving the message. As in, they've attempted to change something. Our efforts aren't in vain. We're slowly making small adjustments to the world around us with every attempt. And maybe, just maybe, if we try hard enough, we can breathe life back into our shattered home. And that is the lore of Oxygen Not Included. Alright, that's it. Video's over. Pack it up, boys. You know the drill. Like the video, subscribe, give me your credit card information, and join the Discord server. Thanks for watching. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. Just want to shout out a few amazing people that made this project possible. Thank you so much to Watermelon671, who was able to do some of the preliminary research a few years back, Kazaa and Skyrunner for compiling a lot of the information, and also just Klei in general for making this absolute masterpiece of a game. Please, if you haven't checked out Klei, give them a look, because these guys are amazing at what they do, and they have a lot of passion behind all of their games. I'll catch you guys in the next one.